this reporter, Heidi, what's her name? Przybyla. She's written a piece in Politico attacking the United States Supreme Court. Now, if y'all don't recall, this is the dim-witted genius who went on MSNBC and said this.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
This woman, that genius, the woman who said Christian nationalists, not Christians, Christian nationalists believe our rights, they don't come from Congress or the Supreme Court, but they come from God. Therefore, the founders of this country must be Christian nationalists. Every Christian everywhere who believes our rights come from God must be a Christian nationalist. She has axes to grind and is tending to grind them. Let me read you Heidi Przybyla's recent stories. D.C. Attorney General closes investigation to Arabella Advisors. What happens when an AG dares to investigate Lenard Leo's network? The right way to cover the intersection of religion and politics. Trump allies prepare to infuse Christian nationalism in the second administration. Public Christian schools, Lenard Leo's allies advance a new cause. Judiciary Democrats call for stronger transparency on amicus brief funding. Plain historical falsehoods, how amicus briefs bolstered Supreme Court conservatives. Lenard Leo firm receives $21 million from Leo-linked group. Lenard Leo's firm got nearly $500,000 from conservative nonprofits. Tax filing shows she's clearly working, peddling press releases and doing the bidding of the left when it comes to attacking conservatives on the Supreme Court. Notice that every single story she's written about the courts has been an attack on the right and a defense of the left. What's so interesting is she now has this story about Arabella Associates or Arabella, whatever it is, Advisors, funding a left-wing group to take on the Supreme Court. Here's her story. Demand Justice, a progressive judicial advocacy group, is mounting a major effort to advocate for Supreme Court reforms and prepare for the effects of a second Trump administration. According to a plan first shared with Politico, the group intends to spend $10 million by the end of this year on a range of activities, from conducting opposition research on potential Supreme Court picks to advocating for ethics reforms for the High Court. It will also work to mobilize key constituencies affected by the court's decisions, including women and young people, and to call out a network of far-right judicial activists that laid the groundwork for the conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. Demand Justice wants to elevate the court as a major issue in 2024. This is a press release for Demand Justice. This is a reporter at Politico who has written hostilely, not even trying to hide her biases about conservatives. She's written attack pieces on Lenard Leo, and yet she's pretending that this is a progressive judicial advocacy group. She's pretending that this is just some sort of innocuous group, and it's not. It's funded by Arabella Partners. Now, and notice she ran a story. DCAG, who's a far-left activist, closed his investigation into Arabella Advisors. What is Arabella Advisors? You need to understand what Arabella Advisors is. Arabella is a vast fundraising network for the Democrats where money goes into Arabella Advisors and they circulate it among left-wing groups. Founded in 2005 as a kind of facilitator for tax-exempt organizations and charitable donors, Arabella provides backdoor functions for nonprofits, including legal advices, human resources, accounting, and the like. One of its services is helping donors maintain their anonymity. There are many legitimate reasons why charitable donors seek to remain anonymous. Sometimes it's rooted in humility. Other times they want to avoid being hit up for other donations. When it comes to political giving, they may not want to court controversy. Arabella is a dark money juggernaut. Through its constellation of nonprofits, it brought in close to $3 billion in dark money in 2022. The behemoth in the Arabella network, the 1630 Fund, raised nearly $380 million. Arabella Advisors has spent more money in the political process than any of the groups on the right. Have you heard that? Do you know that? Because they are obsessed, the left is, with talking about how much money the right is pouring into politics. In fact, Arabella Advisors has spent orders of magnitude more from the left, and we don't know who their donors are. It is suspected they have funded some of these pro-Palestinian protests. It's suspected they funded the Black Lives Matter protests. But we don't know where all the money comes from. We have to trust that it comes from American citizens and not foreigners trying to interfere. We're just supposed to trust this. It's absurd. Arabella Advisors, this is from CBS News, Arabella Advisors created a group called Impetus. Arabella Advisors, which oversees a web of nonprofits that today funnels more dark money into American elections and political causes than any on either side of the political divide. And Politico's Heidi Przybyla, she writes this piece about this demand justice group as if it's some innocuous good government group. She never mentions that it's funded by Arabella Advisors, and I assure you she knows it. She may be stupid because she doesn't know what Christians are versus Christian nationalists, but she's spoon-fed enough information, and she's reporting this as if she has no idea where it comes from. Now, what I find very notable here is that she was willing to cover Arabella Advisors and that the D.C. Attorney General says there's nothing here to see. But she's run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces attacking Lenard Leo and conservative groups, shadowy money groups. But nothing about Arabella Advisors that she casted the same way. This is an organized attack through this reporter who's just a stenographer for the left. And you can clearly see she's not very smart, nor is she grounded in any sort of information. She's just spoon-fed and regurgitates. She's a stenographer and a muppet. Someone has their hand up her backside, moving her lips and banging her keyboard for her as she's given the press credit. It's very clear that she's not bright enough and only does what the left spoon feeds her with her axe to grind, given the contents of what she's doing. And shame on Politico for having someone clearly this biased, clearly this partisan, clearly this hostile to the right, who's unwilling to give them a fair hearing, even as she does cover work. But this is all part of the quiet insurrection. You see, the left wants you to look at what's happened with the right, and they want you to look at January 6th, and they want you to look at the protesters. They want you to look at all that. Pay no attention to these sorts of things. They're spending $10 million to try to discredit the Supreme Court. They're attacking an institution of the American government with anonymous donors. We don't even know if they're foreign or domestic donors. They're trying to discredit and undermine the United States Supreme Court with anonymous donations and a group of reporters taking advantage of the First Amendment to be able to smear the Supreme Court on behalf of these anonymous donors. That sounds very insurrectionary. It sounds very unstable. The Democrats have lectured us about the Supreme Court. They've lectured us about shadow groups on the right. They've lectured us about foreign interference. They've lectured us about Russian interference. We don't know who's interfering. We know they've got a lot of money. We know they spend more money than all other groups on the left and right in politics. We don't know who the donors are. Could be the Chinese, could be the Russians. We don't know. They don't disclose it. They just signed the certification saying, oh, yeah, we promised. They're legit. Trust us. And Politico regurgitates their talking points to cast doubt on the Supreme Court. They're going to spend money attacking the Supreme Court, an unelected group. They're going to spend money trying to delegitimize court decisions that they don't like. And they have their stenographers in the press telling us it's okay, that this is good, that it's just about reform. They try to undermine any institution they do not control. Not very democratic, is it? Not very supportive of the Republican ideals of this country when you have to use shadow groups with anonymous donors to do it. They brag about transparency. They attack the right for lacking transparency, and they don't want to be transparent. And they're using this reporter to do it. This reporter has gone on television and smeared all Christians as Christian nationalists for believing their rights come from God. And right before the 4th of July, where we celebrate the Declaration of Independence, that says we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, we should note that she has never corrected the record on that. She's never apologized for this mirror. In fact, when I politely pointed it out, she blocked me on social media. And now she's serving as a stenographer for a left-wing group to attack the one functioning branch of government. Because remember what this is, for her and for the left, it's about power. They got to undermine the Supreme Court because they don't control the Supreme Court. They don't get their way from the Supreme Court. So they have to attack the Supreme Court. This is a well-orchestrated insurrectionary campaign in the shadows to destabilize and discredit the one functioning branch of the American government because the left does not control it. At the end of the day, their outrage over the Trump immunity decision, their outrage over the Looper Bright decision, their outrage over the decision yesterday on the Federal Reserve, all of them are about power. That's the only rational, coherent nexus of logic, is that this is about, they don't like the Supreme Court gutting the institutions they control, so they must gut the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court over the last week has said the presidency and the executive branch bureaucracy are too powerful. They must cede their power back to Congress, and they're attacking the Supreme Court for that because it's about the power. And this stenographer at the Politico is their lead parrot, their lead Muppet. And I would like to know which group it is that has their arm up her backside, causing her to bang away at the keyboard and mouth off nonsense on MSNBC, because she's very clearly working on an agenda. She's not actually an objective reporter, and anyone who thinks otherwise should just look at what she writes and the way she writes it. If she was objective, she would be pointing out that this group that wants to undermine the Supreme Court with $10 million is from a shadowy left-wing group, and instead she's used this piece to attack conservatives yet again. There should be accountability at Politico for this, and there won't be, because Politico, just like they covered for Joe Biden, is in on this as well. The press corps increasingly is the enemy of freedom.